Hi Year 10, welcome to Biomes Lesson 4. Please make sure that you completed all your work from yesterday for Biomes Lesson 3. That should be your first task today. Please make sure that you submitted done or complete on that school box due work so that I can send you the sample answers to mark your questions with. Please remember that those questions will be very, very similar to your assessment task in week 7, so it really is in your interest to get those sample answers and make sure you're on the right track. If you finish that, we can get started now with Biomes Lesson 4. So, the first thing we're going to look at today is spatial dimensions. Spatial dimensions is all about where things are and why they're there. So when we're talking about the Great Barrier Reef, we're going to look at its spatial dimensions today. When you answer a spatial dimensions paragraph, there are a few aspects that you need to include. They are location, area, latitude and longitude, altitude, shape, and continuity. And there's an acronym that we've given you just here, LALASK, to help you try and remember those components. So, the Great Barrier Reef, its location, it's located off the northern Queensland coast of Australia. So we know that Australia looks like this, Queensland is a northeastern state, and the Great Barrier Reef exists off its coastline. The area of the Great Barrier Reef is approximately 348,700 kilometres squared. It's got a latitudinal and longitudinal range. Now, some places might have specific exact latitude and longitudes, but the Great Barrier Reef, because it's so large, has a range. So its latitudinal range is from 8 degrees south to 24 degrees south. We can see here where it sits in this tropical region. And its longitudinal range is between 142 degrees east and 153 degrees east, moving this way across its longitude. Altitude. Because the Great Barrier Reef is a coral reef, it's located below sea level. Your own ecosystem case studies will have altitudes above sea level, in metres above sea level. The shape, it's quite a linear stretch. It's almost a straight line. It's almost a straight line and stretches from Fly River in Papua New Guinea in the north to Fraser Island here in the south. The continuity of the Great Barrier Reef is quite a long continuity. The current rendition, or current format, of the Great Barrier Reef is about 8 to 12,000 years old. However, those current corals sit and build upon previous corals that may be up to 42 million years old. So it has a very long continuity. The second point we're going to look at today is the distribution of the world's major biomes. Now, we know that biomes are clusters of ecosystems that exist all throughout the world. We learnt those definitions in our very first biomes lesson last term. Now, we know there's also some debate about how many different types of biomes there actually are, but this is what we're going to go with today. So these are all the different types of biomes that are shown on this map, and you can see that they're colour-coded as to where they exist. Now, when we talk about the distribution, we really want to think spatially again and think whereabouts some of these different biomes are located. So if we're looking at this image and looking at our legend here with the names of the biomes, we can make some generalizations. We can see that in the North and the South Pole, we're looking at a lot of rock and ice. So the biome rock and ice occur in the North and South Poles. In these equatorial regions, the areas around the tropics, north and south of the equator, we can see a lot of tropical aspects, tropical rainforests, tropical grasslands, and coral reefs, and they sit around this tropics band because they need those specific conditions in order to function. Further north, we can see here in Northern Europe and the North American continent, we can see some boreal forests, and you can identify other aspects here, deserts, things like that. You need to be able to write a generalized answer to where the major biomes of the world are located. The last thing we're going to look at today is the impacts of COVID-19 on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, I mentioned yesterday that COVID-19 has significantly impacted the Great Barrier Reef, particularly around its utility value and the fact that without tourism, the Great Barrier Reef doesn't meet its utility value by making money for the Australian and global economies. But there have also been some positive impacts from COVID-19. Without tourism, it's allowed the reef to regenerate. It's not being interrupted, it's not being disturbed, and it's actually quite a positive thing for the reef to be left alone for a little while. What I'm going to get you to do is read an article, and I'm going to show you where on Schoolbox to find this article in just a minute. What I'd like you to do while you read this article is take some notes under the following headings: economic impacts, social impacts, and environmental impacts. Because when we talk about impacts in geography, these are the three categories that you really should be looking at. So if we were to ask you a question in a geography assessment task in week 7, we might ask you about the economic, social, or environmental impacts of COVID-19 on an ecosystem. And this article will be a really good resource for you to do that. So let me show you where to find this article. Okay, Year 10, so now I'm going to show you how to find that article. Here's our Schoolbox page, same Schoolbox page as always. You just need to scroll down to the Sustainable Biomes tab, this one right here. This will open up a new link for you and take you to the Biomes course page. From here, you can see under links, we've got this article right here, Impacts of the COVID-19 Pandemic on the Great Barrier Reef, and it will open a new tab for you to the article. You need to have a read of that article and make those dot point notes underneath the headings of economic, social, and environmental impacts of the pandemic on the reef. Once you've made those notes, you can go back to the PowerPoint to see the questions that you have to answer for this lesson. Okay, so you should have done your notes, and now it's your turn to answer some questions. So you have to answer questions 12 to 14 on your Biomes worksheet, and just like before, you need to answer those questions on that Google Doc you've been building up. Once you've completed questions 12 to 14, you need to submit done or send me your link as due work on Schoolbox. Once I've had a look at your answers, I will send you the sample answers and you can mark your own work. Once you have finished that and you've marked your work and you've been really honest with your marking, you can continue working on your own ecosystem case study. Please don't forget to keep working on this ecosystem case study because it will also form part of your assessment task in week 7 when we might ask you questions about a specific ecosystem you have studied apart from the Great Barrier Reef. So please don't neglect that. Apart from that, we're done for today. So please make sure you take a bit of a break and you get outside and so get some fresh air. I will see you next lesson.